We've seen this before. The society warned, and no one listened. The signs were clear, the outcomes preventable, yet history is filled with moments when warnings were ignored. Today, we stand again at a crossroads. With haunting echoes from the past, we must ask, are we listening this time? Noam Chomsky, one of the most enduring intellectual voices of our time, has often pointed to history not as a distant tale, but as a mirror. You can learn a lot about the present, he said, by looking at the wreckage of the past. That wreckage, whether fallen empires or broken democracies, didn't arrive without warning. The seeds were sown, the alarm bells rang, and still societies pressed forward toward collapse. Chapter 1, Lessons from Rome. Consider the Roman Empire, not as a mythic past, but as a complex society that once shaped nearly every corner of the known world. Rome was not simply a civilization of power, it was one of ideas. Its influence endures in our architecture, our legal codes, even in the very language of law and government. The Roman Republic, in particular, set a precedent for democratic ideals that still echo in modern politics. But as history shows, even the greatest civilizations are not immune to decline. The fall of Rome wasn't the dramatic collapse we often imagine. It wasn't as simple as a sudden sacking by the barbarian hordes at the gates. The reality is far more insidious. Rome's downfall was not just the result of external threats, but a slow, grinding erosion from within. It crumbled not with a single cataclysmic event, but through a series of small, seemingly inconsequential choices that compounded over time. Rome's strength initially lay in its republic, a form of government in which power was distributed and leaders were held accountable by the people. However, as the empire expanded, the concentration of wealth and political power into the hands of a few elites led to the erosion of the republican ideal. Rome's ruling class stopped governing for the people, focusing instead on preserving their own dominance. Ordinary citizens were increasingly marginalized, pushed into poverty, and left with little voice in governance. Political debates became spectacles, military conquests turned into profit-driven ventures, and the Republic's original ideas were smothered under layers of corruption and self-interest. Chomsky frequently points out that one of the most dangerous outcomes of such concentration of wealth and power is that it leads to a concentration of political power as well. Concentration of wealth brings concentration of power, he warns. When that power is unchecked, democracy doesn't vanish in a single dramatic moment of tyranny. It fades slowly through indifference and elite arrogance. Political leaders stop being stewards of the people's will and become more concerned with perpetuating their own power. Rome's ecological decline mirrors its political downfall. Deforestation, soil erosion, and resource depletion weaken the empire's foundations, yet leaders continue to pursue short-term profits rather than long-term sustainability. When the signs of collapse become undeniable, the empire's infrastructure and society were already too far gone to recover. This pattern of ignoring long-term sustainability in favor of immediate gain should serve as a warning for today. No society, however powerful, is immune to decline. Without vigilance and accountability, even the greatest empires can crumble. Chapter 2, The Road to Fascism. Fast forward to the 20th century. Germany in the 1930s. The country was reeling from the aftermath of World War I, devastated by economic collapse and fractured by internal divisions. Into that fragile landscape, a movement arose that promised strength, revival, and unity. The Nazi rise to power, with its unspeakable horrors, is a chapter of history we all know too well. But before those horrors, there were warnings, clear, chilling signs that too many chose to ignore. The road to fascism in Germany didn't come through an immediate violent coup. It was a gradual process, incremental and insidious. Chomsky's often pointed to the rise of the Nazis as a case study in the fragility of democratic institutions. The descent into fascism wasn't sudden. It was a slow erosion, one law at a time, one silence at a time, one manipulation at a time. What started as a radical fringe movement gradually infiltrated and overtook the institutions that had once ensured democracy. In the early days, intellectuals, writers, and activists raised alarms. They warned of the dangerous rhetoric of a charismatic leader who targeted minorities, attacked the free press, and used fear as a tool to consolidate power. Yet, those warnings were dismissed or drowned out by the growing chorus of nationalism and fear. Chomsky underscores that the rise of fascism was not a failure of intelligence. It was a failure of will, a failure of imagination, and a failure of solidarity. People convinced themselves that everything would be fine, that it was just rhetoric, just politics. But by the time the full horror was apparent, the machinery of repression was already in full motion. This gradual shift towards totalitarianism reveals a critical lesson. Evil does not always arrive with a bold declaration of intent. It often arrives subtly, cloaked in the guise of protection, unity, and tradition. It's not the actions of a few villains, but the indifference and complacency of many that allow such horrors to unfold. This history serves as a stark reminder that democratic institutions must never be taken for granted. They require constant vigilance, and once they begin to erode, it may already be too late. Chapter 3, Nature's Warnings. While political decline is often the most visible threat to a society's stability, nature too offers its own warnings, often in the form of an environmental collapse. One of the most striking examples of this is the Dust Bowl of the 1930s in the American Midwest. The Dust Bowl was not simply a natural disaster, it was a man-made one. Decades of overplowing, monoculture farming, and disregard for the land's natural balance had stripped the soil of its ability to retain moisture. Scientists and agronomists had warned of the danger for years, advocating for more sustainable farming practices, but their warnings were ignored. The agricultural community, driven by short-term profits, pushed forward with the same destructive practices, and when disaster struck, it was devastating. The U.S. government, too, failed to act until it was too late. Only after millions were displaced and entire regions were rendered uninhabitable did they create the Soil Conservation Service. But by then, the damage was done. The Dust Bowl is a chilling reminder of how environmental warnings can be disregarded until the costs of inaction are too high to ignore. The pattern is all too familiar. Experts warn, the public ignores, and governments delay action until the crisis becomes unavoidable. This history isn't just a cautionary tale about farming practices. It's a broader lesson about the dangers of ignoring the natural world's warnings. We ignore ecological sustainability at our peril. Chapter 4, Crisis at the Crossroads. Today, we face an even more urgent environmental crisis, climate change. The signs are all around us: glaciers melting, forests burning, oceans rising. Entire cities are at risk. Entire nations face obliteration. And yet, we continue on a path of inaction. The science has been clear for decades. In 1988, NASA scientist James Hansen warned Congress about global warming. In 2006, Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth reached millions. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has published report after report, and yet political leaders continue to stall. As Chomsky has said, it's not that we don't know what to do, it's that the power structures are not designed to act in the public interest. Climate change is not just an environmental issue, it's a justice issue. Those who've contributed the least to the crisis, the global poor, indigenous communities, and future generations, are the ones who will suffer the most. Meanwhile, those with the power to act continue to prioritize short-term profits and political gain over long-term survival. This crisis is no longer theoretical. It's here, and the consequences of inaction are existential. We've been warned, but the question remains, will we listen before it's too late? Chapter 5, The New Authoritarianism. While the planet burns, democratic norms are also eroding. Across the globe, we're witnessing the rise of a new form of authoritarianism, not through military coups, but through constitutional manipulation. Elected leaders are consolidating power, manipulating electoral systems, and subverting democratic institutions, all while maintaining the illusion of democracy. In countries like Hungary, Turkey, Brazil, and even the United States, leaders have systematically dismantled checks and balances, weakened the media, and undermined the judiciary. As Chomsky notes, this is a narrowing of acceptable opinion. He warns, allow lively debate, but only within a very narrow spectrum. The aim isn't to outright ban dissent, but to carefully shape and control it, limiting the range of acceptable discourse until the truth itself becomes malleable. This subtle manipulation of democratic norms isn't something we can afford to ignore. Democracy doesn't die in a blaze of fire. It dies in a fog of confusion, disinformation, and deliberate misdirection. And once it's gone, we may not even remember when it disappeared. Chapter 6, The AI Frontier. Now, we face a new and uncharted threat: artificial intelligence. AI has the potential to revolutionize medicine, science, education, and countless other fields, but it also carries the risk of unprecedented control over information, surveillance, and power. As Chomsky observes, AI is being developed not with liberation in mind, but with leverage to control, profit, and dominate. The warning signs are already here. Authoritarian states are using AI to monitor and suppress dissent. Corporations are deploying biased algorithms in hiring, policing, and healthcare. Deepfakes and disinformation are eroding our ability to trust anything we see or hear. Once again, the warnings are ignored. Regulation is slow, public understanding is shallow, and profit motives continue to drive technological development. The critical question isn't just what AI can do, but who decides what it will do and for whom. As AI continues to evolve, the risks of misuse are greater than ever. And once AI becomes deeply embedded in our societies, it may be too late to turn back. Chapter 7. Are we listening? So, here we stand, surrounded by signals, urgent warnings, flashing bright and clear. We've heard them before from history, from science, from the natural world, but the question remains, are we listening? The truth is, we've been warned countless times. We've seen the patterns, we know the consequences of inaction, yet the response often remains the same: denial, complacency, and the belief that somehow things will get better on their own. Noam Chomsky once said, "The truth is, we've been warned, and yet we continue down the same destructive path, ignoring the lessons of the past and the wisdom of those who are trying to wake us up." It's not that the warnings are unclear. On the contrary, they're more urgent than ever. We know that the climate crisis is not a distant threat, but a present reality. We know that authoritarianism is creeping back, not through coups, but through subtle manipulations of democracy. And we know that technology, particularly artificial intelligence, is being shaped to serve the interests of the powerful few, with little regard for ethics or equity. So why are we not acting? The problem isn't ignorance, it's a failure of will. We live in a system that prioritizes short-term profits, political stability, and comfort over long-term sustainability and justice. Leaders, corporations, and individuals may acknowledge the warnings, but they often lack the resolve to act. It's easier to deny, to delay, to pretend that things aren't as bad as they are. The truth is uncomfortable, and the path to real change requires sacrifices that many are unwilling to make. But the clock is ticking. The warnings are no longer just theories. They are happening now. Natural disasters, rising inequality, political unrest. These are not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a deeper, more systemic problem. And yet the response from too many remains the same: inaction, indecision, and an unwillingness to face the consequences head on. This is not a situation of helplessness. We are not powerless. We have the knowledge, the tools, and the moral obligation to change course. The question is whether we're willing to confront the truth and take the difficult steps necessary to change the trajectory of our future. The choice is ours. History is spoken, science is shouting, and nature is crying out for help. The question remains, will we listen? Or will we let the same forces that have doomed past civilizations determine our fate as well? The future won't remember our intentions. It'll remember our choices. The warnings are clear. Let's respond to them before it's too late.